So, hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, JUnit the Next Generation. And I'd like to welcome you all. This is going to be the first webinar I do for a while now and going to be hopefully the one of many. And we're going to talk about all kinds of testing. And obviously, it's the next generation. So decided to go on with Captain Picard here. And if you're asking yourself, am I going to actually continue with these memes? The answer is yes. We're going to have a lot of next generation pictures here and going to use them for death. So yeah. Why am I going to do that? Yeah, for the glory of JUnit. What we're going to discuss today is JUnit 5 and a bit of its history. And I'm going to cover some of its features, 5 features that I like and not many people know about, and how they can use it, how you can use these kind of features to better your life, because that's what's important. I want to start with a bit about me because that's my favorite topic. My name is Gil. I'm a consultant and coach for all kinds of things that are developers and testers centric. Obviously, JUnit is one of my favorite tools. And I speak and teach a lot about how to not only operate tools, which is nice, but these things you can actually learn on the internet, but how can you use them wisely? How can you be more productive and effective using these tools? Talk about methodologies and how to test better, how to design better, architecture and design for testability, and what you can do in order to be able to test better, and obviously how to test, which is a kind of another skill on its own. I have a site called Testing Gil and Everyday Unit Testing. You can catch me on Twitter, and a lot of these links are going to be at the end. And if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A tab, please, and so I can go back to them. And the examples I'm going to show are going to be available to download from GitHub, and I'm going to post this set of slides as well as the video on the site, so you can watch it not immediately after this because I'm going to be tired, but after that. So I have 2 books. One is Everyday Unit Testing, which talks about unit testing, and one that I write and is available for preview called Everyday Spring Testing, which is, as you can guess, it's about testing in spring. So Everyday Unit Testing, we're going to raffle 2 books. One I'm going to pick it by the end of this webinar, so stick around and you might hear your voice, at least your name. And another one we're going to raffle after this webinar, and the winners will get an email next week regarding how to get it and so on. So sweepstakes are good. So let's talk about the history a bit. JUnit 5, if you look at Maven Central, you'll see that that the first JUnit 5 upload was, I think that it was October 2016, so it's a bit more than 4 years ago. And the reason I'm doing this webinar is that people are still either haven't moved to using JUnit from JUnit 4 or even 3 to JUnit 5, or are in the process, and you think 4 years is a lot of time. It's been in development for 2 years prior to that. And JUnit is one of the most downloadable library from Maven. You probably want to think, why is that? And I think some of it is a bit of fear from transformation and so on. And one of the things that we'll see is that from the outside, There are a couple of features that JUnit 4 is missing, or you could do them, but it took a lot of effort and it was complex and it was not readable. And JUnit 5 really improves on them. But a lot of the rewriting of JUnit from 4 to 5 was actually on the engine inside. And it was remodularization, which is a tough word, but I'm guessing in the 24th century it's easier to say that. And ability to extend it in so many ways that you can do this if you've used Spring. You've probably seen on a JUnit test run with Spring JUnit 4 test runner or Mockito runner, but it was kind of very complex to add something on top of JUnit in order to integrate it with other stuff. And a lot of the development was put in so you can really extend it better, and it shows actually. So, and it's a lot faster and you can run things in parallel and so on. So it is really next generation. But if you just look at the outside, you won't see that much of a difference. And that's good because basically we're talking about tools, and tools are supposed to help us. And if they're doing that in a very simple interface, that's cool too. And we have to remember that test frameworks, like any other tools, we kind of use them like grabbing them off the shelf and use them as is. But there's a lot of information and a lot of thought going into that you can actually use, not just by understanding what the future can do to you, but what you can do and take it further so you can live your life happier, productively, and effectively. And you have to think about that as well. So I'm going to approach a few of the features here, as you'll see, from this point, like not just what the feature does, but what does it mean so for you as a test writer or maybe a test reader to exploit it and make your things better. So without further ado, I'm going to show you to your future. And your future is made of a couple of features that I picked to show you. And the first one is about backward compatibility. So like I said, people are not moving directly to JUnit 5 unless they're starting a new project. But if you've written like hundreds of thousands of tests before, you'd probably be reluctant to actually move forward with that. So backward compatibility is very important. What about all these tests? So let's see first what the JUnit Test 5 looks like. And if you look at it, you'll see that that it looks like a regular JUnit 4 test. It has the test thing, test annotation, although you can see it takes it from org JUnit Jupyter.api. So that's the new library. Why Jupyter? Jupyter is the 5th planet from the sun. So JUnit 5, plus it starts with JU, which is very cool. The words collide into one and everything's cool. If you look at the POM, you'll see that the dependency we need is org.junit.jupyter, current version is 5.7. So you need this. What you also want, if you're using all kinds of asserts that are specials, especially if you're using assert this, which doesn't come with JUnit, you might want Hamcrest. And this is the thing that runs the backward compatibility thing, the test from before. It's called the JUnit vintage. And you want to add this dependency if you have other tests in your code. So let's look at this test. Basically, regular test. What's important about it is that what replaces the test from org.junit.test is this one. And instead of the assert class, we have assertions class, which basically has the same thing. Now, you might be wondering by now, why is this called an embarrassing test? Well, because this is kind of embarrassing. You know that everything on the internet shows you unit test stuff with calculators, and this is obviously not different. Let's take a look at the add thing that you might be surprised to see. Yeah, it actually adds the two numbers. And why is that an embarrassing thing? Because I'm not testing my code. I'm testing basically Java or the compiler and so on. So it is good to have a test like that, but it's, the only bug it will catch is if I change this from a plus to minus. So probably not a very cool test to have. But we're not going to talk about the quality of my tests today. Is it running together? Yes, so this is a JUnit 5 test. The same project contains also a JUnit 4 test. And you see this is from org.junit and org.unitassert, and everything's running in the same thing, in the same project. All I had to do was basically either move the dependency or move the code inside it. It just runs. What does it mean for you? Well, first of all, if you already have a project, I'm using Maven, but any other system like Gradle will do, you just add the dependency and it will just work. If you're starting something with a JUnit 5, you might want to import the files and they will just work. So the main thing about it is that you don't have to rewrite anything. It just works. And the cool thing is that you can start this tomorrow or today. Hopefully not today. It's going to be very late today. So that was the first feature I wanted to talk about, backward compatibility. The second thing I want to talk about is more accurate description. Now with JUnit 4, you had to kind of twist the test name to show you something. So you kind of mesh Java with English or something like that. And if you've used other frameworks like in other languages, JavaScript, or you had in a Spark with Groovy, you already had some kind of ability to create better display names. And JUnit 5 comes with those. So let me show you. So as you can see, apart from the test, we have an annotation for display name, a better name, but still, and this will replace the name of the test in my report. So if I run this, you'll see that apart from the class name, I get the same description I wrote here. Now, why is that important? First of all, we're kind of getting away from the make the test name read like English, and therefore you have to run through this like translation computer in your head of what they mean. What you'll see in the next feature is also a combination where you want to go. You want a better description where you can define not just what the test does, but also maybe its context. Why is it important? Why do you want it to actually do what it does? So this is very cool. So you can write better things, and this is where I'm starting to go from just having a feature where, yeah, it's cool to write a better test name, but if you're starting to think about multiple tests running, this gives you a better way to not just describe this kind of tests, but when you start to think about in the context of multiple tests, it becomes important, which I'll show you in a second. Oh, one more thing. People who know Star Trek Next Generation know there are actually 4 lights. So why am I mentioning that there are 5 lights? let me get back to the code and explain. So you see that the string here is basically like a comment. It is a comment, it's a description. But much like a test name or the description itself, it really behave like comments. Many times we start writing tests, we write the name of the tests, and then we can start writing the test, but then we like make it turn and go to another way. We may forget to rename the test back to what we actually meant. So it's basically like test names and descriptions like that are like comments which suffer from not being updated when they need to be. So you have to remember that both test name and display name are not only important for you to find stuff in the report, but also they have to be accurate and describe what you actually want. Because if you are not showing in a display what you actually want to test, this can be very confusing. And confusing means that when you actually look at the report and then you look at the test and say, well, something wrong here, they're not doing the same thing, you're confused and it's going to take more time for you to solve the problem. And that's not something what we want. We want, if something goes wrong, to find the problem quickly and save and fix it. But the more we take care of the accuracy of the description, it's going to take less time. Right. So next thing is nested tests. What are nested tests? Well, basically, if you look at those, you see that's my class name. And I'm starting sprinkling kind of a few features from JUnit. You see, if you were used to JUnit 4, you know, before and after, before each and after each is the JUnit 5 replacement. So obviously this runs before every test. But what you see here is a nested class, which is inside the test class, which organizes my embarrassing tests, which includes one test right now, and the humiliating tests, which is continuing, has this kind of class. I also put in another test, which is part of the main class. I put also disabled here, so it won't run. And because it's passive aggressive, we don't like those. And disabled is the equivalent of ignore in JUnit 4. So when I run this, run it, the first thing that I'm going to get is a question for Eclipse. What the hell do you want from me? Do you want me to run the whole class or the other nested classes? I'm going to run everything. And you'll see that I get the passive aggressive test disabled, so it didn't run, the ignored icon, and I get an hierarchical view of the tests. Now, why is that important? Up until today, up until JUnit 5, there was kind of a model for organizing tests. If you started doing unit tests, you probably did like for every class, you had a test class, and within this test class, you'll have all the test cases for this kind of class. And things get a bit murky when you started going integration tests and so on. But the model still applied. The way we organize tests is basically all things that belong to some kind of module or thing went into this file. Now, with that separation, everything went like, and every test was equivalent. So nested tests are giving us another way to, and more flexibility to organize our tests by functionality or so on, maybe other stuff, but that's another level of separation when we start organizing a test. And this is very cool because up until now, you probably had one method of organizing tests. And I see that a lot with my clients, is that even if they did and they were kind of disciplined of maintaining this, it didn't stick for long. And usually it doesn't stick because the model doesn't fit everything. So this gives us another flexibility, so we can do this a bit more. And we can at least try to organize it a bit better, and you'll see that in a report as well. Plus, the integration with Eclipse or IntelliJ, whatever tool that you use, is better, as you can see, and you can run and get different things together. Another type of separation that might be useful for you is that you might want all the things that touch one functionality in one test class, but some of the tests are slow and some of the tests are quick, like the quick or the unit test, and the slow ones are dependent on some kind of other dependency which is not always available, like running into a database or something like that. So if you have this, you can run all the unit tests together, which run very quickly many times, and you separate them from the other long-running tests. So we're kind of separating functionality with a different type of perspective, and having all these kinds of perspective that we already do in our class, in our project, can pour into the way we organize the tests. It is important to say that when you do have to stick into your kind of method of tests. It does take some discipline to do that. So let's get back to the presentation, and number 4. And number 4 talks about conditions, kind of continuing with the last example that I gave you. Is I kind of mixed the functionality with the speed of the tests, but there are other ways to look at tests to put them in different groups. So let's take a look at example number 4, which contains these annotations, and there are quite a few of them that come with JUnit 5. And enabled for JRE or enabled for JRE, you range your annotations to specify which tests we want, or exactly when do we want the tests to run. So I didn't mention it, JUnit 5 requires Java 8 or above. That's usually not a problem for most people. So this test runs Java 8 to Java 13. Which is cool because it's going to run. However, this test has an enabled on OS annotation. And I put Linux on it. So this test will run only on Linux. So when I run this class of the tests, you'll see that my Java version Jerry on this machine is not within this range, and I'm not running on Linux, which is running on Windows. Why is that important? Again, the way we think about tests is basically how the code is structured and mainly functionality. But if we're looking at the perspectives of where tests should run or dependency on kinds of Java runtimes, where will we put this? Now, with JUnit 4, we'd probably put them in another project or maybe different classes and run them manually and so on. But this ability gives us the freedom to group things together, let's say on the power functionality, but with the conditional annotations, we can specify when to run them so they won't fail. So I'm talking about names and descriptions and organization, And this has nothing to do with JUnit, basically. And this goes back to what I told you in the beginning. JUnit 5 is a tool, but managing and organizing your tests is something that you do all the time. You give them better names, better descriptions, deciding where to put them. And it doesn't matter if it's JUnit or another framework. It's something that you have to do. But if you start thinking about how you do this and you develop your own method, this is where JUnit 5 actually comes and help you, because it gives you, with these kind of features, the way to not kind of stick you, pull you into the corner and tell you, well, this is how you have to group your tests if you want me to run them. JUnit 5 looks a bit from the outset and says, I understand that different people have different methods of grouping and organizing tests. I'm going to help them because it makes sense that all kinds of perspectives go in there. And we, the development team of JUnit, want to help the test writers to maintain those tests easily. Right. Number 5. So if you've written a test or two, there's always like, after a couple of tests, you understand that, hey, I can put a couple of assert equals there. And quickly the question comes up. How many asserts is it allowed to put in one test? Should we group the asserts or no? Now, there's a like rule of thumb thing that I use that when people ask me that, I usually ask them, first of all, what are you testing? And the thing that the testing is an operation, a single one. And then this kind of single operation may have different results. So you might want to assert all these kind of things, especially if you have like big data objects and not just a small unit test. So that was fun for a while until JUnit 5 says, you know what? I'm going to give you an option to do all kinds of assertions with a twist. And it looks like that. It's called grouped asserts. And what do we see? So it has an API called assert all. And assert all basically is a container for all kinds of Lambda expressions, which are asserts. You can see here that I'm using assert that from Hemcrest, like I said before. And here I'm using assert does not throw. You probably know assert throws from current assert assert that comes with Hemcrest for a while. Now, if I run these kind of tests, you can probably figure out what's going to happen since all of them pass. So that's cool. But the interesting happens, and you'd see the display name happens here, like we've seen before. Let's break this test. And let's break this test as well. Let's run these again. Let's assume that I actually ran them. Oh, okay. Excellent. So obviously the test fails. What do we see here? First of all, you'll see that the real people comes from here. So we talked about grouping tests and nesting tests. This is grouping asserts. So this kind of asserts have a heading as well. If everything works out, it doesn't matter. If something does go wrong, we get the heading here. So again, a better way to organize our asserts. What you also see here is that there are two failures. And assert all means assert all. It's not like the default in JUnit 4 when there was an assert that broke, it didn't continue. You could actually tweak that, and obviously in JUnit 5 you can tweak that as well to run all the asserts. But assert all actually runs all the asserts and give you all the information that you want. So that's cool as well. And I think that's the thing that kind of wins this argument for multiple asserts. before that, the idea is that you want failure as much as quickly as possible, and you want on the first fail that you want to test a fail on the first assert that actually fails. But assuming that you wanted the 10 or 20, it was kind of confusing to see where the problem was. With these kind of capabilities, when you can group asserts to certain groups of I'm checking this kind of fields now, I'm just checking these kind of objects now, and I'm separating them, I can know exactly what the test failed on, and not just by number 9 out of 10. Or you can think about having like 10 asserts in the body of the test, as they're all equivalent, right? Everyone could fail. We wrote them this way. But here we're talking, when we can group tests, or we can group asserts, we can understand when a different group will actually failed us and other groups didn't. Now, if you think about test reports, you know that when you're looking, like we have like in our code, we have an if and an else, so we'll have two tests for them, and one of them failed. You probably want to know that there's another test, one for the condition of the true condition, one for the false condition. You want to see how that fares, because it helps you to know if the if part failed but the else part passed, then the problem is inside the if condition. Grouping this helps you identify where the problem is when something fails. And it helps you to do that better, because this grouping makes sense when you're testing all kinds of things. So assert all is really helpful in terms of, if we talked about earlier about organizing tests, organizing asserts is the other part. What we're testing when we're not doing just unit tests and test kind of one or two things. If we test multiple things, it makes sense to group these things together. So these are the assert all things. So when I prepared it, it called it the 5 features about JUnit, but I decided to give you a bonus. So a few more. So I'm not sure if you know about parameterized tests. Parameterized tests were already part of JUnit 4. And what they did is, we know that tests don't get parameters. And we usually use tests as example. In this case, get this information, this and this and this. And we're expecting that result, and that's a test. Parameterized tests are a way to run multiple cases in a single way. So let me show you example of that. So in JUnit 4, you had to write a class for that and pass the parameters in a collection and do all kinds of jumping and hoops to get the parameters in. In JUnit 5, it's much easier. You put a parameterized test instead of test annotation on this one, and you give it a source. JUnit 5 comes with all kinds of annotations of where a source of values can come. I'm using here CSV source. CSV means comma separated values. So each set of 3, which be injected here. And you can see that this test here asserts that calc.add of these 2 parameters is equals to the third one. Okay, so if I run this, let's run this, and obviously it passes. I can see that each test, each set succeeded. Let's break one and run it again. You'll see that the second set failed and it gives you the assertion that actually failed with, again, the message that I put in here. Now, JUnit 5 comes with all kinds of sources, so you can get it from CSV, you can get it from environment or parameter, you can get also, you can give it a method source, which is a factory method that provides you with the different types of values. This is kind of cool. I remember like years ago, before that, one of my clients was running on a nightly basis a simple tests which had basically three parameters. One was the username, the second one the password, and the third one was the result of the authentication. So we had like thousands or tens of thousands of passwords that he would run as a regression test every night to see if the authentication works correctly. And it was a simple test like this. You write it once, you run it many times. So parameterized tests are very cool for that. But wait, there's more, because JUnit 5 comes with kinds of parameterized tests. One of them is called the repeated test. And you can actually do think that repeated test means run it 3 times. Of course it does. And you get a repetition info. So you can check the current repetition and the total repetition as well. And if I run this, you see that I'm running a counter 0, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm at it, and I'm counting that it's less than 10. If I change that for 5, the last set should fail. So let's run this again. And you'll see that the third iteration failed. What does it give you? It gives you, first of all, in terms of parameterized test, it's easier to write these things much easier and in different kind of ways than you had to jump through hoops with JUnit 4 to do them. But it gives you all kinds of way to supply not everything like the counter it's giving to you. So, and you can see that, I haven't showed you. Remember, we failed on the last repetition, 3 of 3, and I embedded the number 3, which is the current repetition, inside the description. So I can actually give more information about when I'm running it. So that's pretty cool. It's very useful if you have to run IDs and stuff like that. And you can use parameterized tests when you have not just a counter, but you have some kind of a way to remember to create these kind of sets, or a factory method that can generate it or run it from a file, whatever you need. Write the test once and then run it over and over again. And the cool thing about JUnit 5 is the reporting, because the most problematic feature of this in JUnit 5 when it actually worked was that you probably need to create a lot of logs or error messages in order to find out what was the problem when it actually happened. And you can see by the integration here inside the IDE, and obviously in JUnit reports, which goes into Jenkins or whatever have you, you get a lot of information out of the box. So it's not just easy to write, it's easy to use. And that's a lot more important than just knowing that the feature is there. All right, so we're coming to the end of the presentation, which I hope you found useful to you. If you have questions, please write them in the Q&A box as I'm summarizing what I showed you. JUnit 5 basically is ready for use today. Okay, even if you haven't moved yet, it's very easy to take whatever tests that you already have and use them. The features that come with it basically out of the box are the same ones that you already know about JUnit. You even have much more customization about them. But there's a lot of things that are extending the JUnit as a framework. And the extension comes not just from running stuff, but also about how you organize and how you manage and how you're able to report, or JUnit able to report, or read a report. For you, it makes your life much more happy. But apart from that, you're getting more effective in what you do. We want our tests to help us find problems, but once we have more than 10, they become part of the work. We have to manage them, we have to organize them, and a lot of the things there go into helping us become better at it. Now, before I talk about the sweepstakes and so on, let's see if there are questions. Can the triggering of grouped asserts be delayed? TestNG has a feature where you can do multiple asserts on a certain object and trigger them with assert object assert all. That's a very good question. I don't think that you can do that out of the box, not in the API itself. Since you get a lambda expression, you can put whatever you want in there. So you can wait for something to complete and then do the asserts inside the lambda. I think it's true not just for assert all, but for any assert you can do that. So there's a lot you can do about assert all. You can even put assert all inside an assert all if it makes sense to you. I know it's possible. I haven't used that, but I'm guessing it makes sense in terms if you want to coordinate something. Usually delaying stuff or playing with timings is not a unit test thing. It's more of an integration thing. When you want to synchronize something, features, I don't believe the feature is there, like using the API, but it is possible to write your own lambda expression or function that does this and wait. Next question, what kind of mock frameworks you use in commercial projects? Personally, I prefer JMock, but sometimes I use PowerMock because of client requirements. What do you use for UI testing Swing? Okay, so that's not a JUnit related questions. I try to use Mockito as much as possible. I use PowerMock where I can't convince the people not, to use Mockito. The reason is this. And I'm talking as someone who worked on development of something like JMock or PowerMock. The way PowerMock and JMock work is by replacing the class loader. And that, as long as it's working, that's okay. But the problem is that it replaces, it modifies the bytecode when it loads to put all kinds of hooks in there. Specifically, the question is it going to be mocked? If so, what should I do? And PowerMock does this. JMock does it as well. And as long as it's working, it's fine. When it doesn't, and sometimes it doesn't because static initializers of something that runs before something that you didn't expect, or something that runs in the background and you didn't know. When this happens, you get errors that most people don't know how to debug, because now you're in between stack frames. It's not like you're inside something, you're inside the bytecode. And the problem that I find is that most people don't know how to debug these things. And what you saved on actually using the testing framework, you kind of go and find out that the debugging is something that you pay for a lot. So unless somebody like holds my throat and said you have to use PowerMock or JMock or something like that. I'm going with simple Mockito, and that's it. For UI testing, I usually don't do that much of system testing for Java. Most of my clients work with backend, so we write tests in the backend. I hear both Swing and JavaFX are good, but usually we work in the backend and write tests for that. I didn't have like a big project where I have to test the UI. Next questions. Can both repeated tests and parameterized tests used at once? I think I just showed you in the same class using repeated and parameterized. You can't use the same test with, you have a different signature. Like, let me go back. You see that this one gets injected with these kind of values, and the repeated tests gets the repetition info, which comes from JUnit. So you can't use in the same tests both of them. You have to find, you have to decide what you want. So that is it. I have time for one more question. No, we actually need to finish. No, one question more. I noticed that you did not have or barely had any feedback message in your assertions. Is that because the reason you displayed good enough in JUnit 5? Any way that you do not think that are helpful with debugging? Okay, so messages in assertions. It's a very big topic. I try not to use them if they explain the same thing of what happened. Because what will happen is that, like in this case, if I wrote 1, 2 is not equal to 3 in my message, to 4, sorry, it is equal, it does equal to 3. If I see a lot of people do that, that does not give me more information that I need to in order to solve the problem. When does it help? This rarely helps, because usually what people do is write around the assertion the meaning of the assertion. What am I really checking here? And usually you can actually derive that from the code, even the tests are, when the tests are written badly. So most of the time, the errors that I see getting used are really do not help me understand the problem, or what actually happened there. So it's not as useful as you might think. If you're adding more information and you're adding context of how this the problem happened, because you remember you already have the what the scenario is this: a test failed on this specific assert. We know the test name. We might have written a display name. We look at the code and we see what assert failed and what the result was. So on top of that, you need to add more information that will help you understand the problem in order to solve it. Usually that would not be part of describing the code, because you don't relate to the code inside the test. You relate more to the scenario. So it's not as useful for me. But if you are able to give more context there in the error message, that will help you with solving the problem, that's okay. This is where I would use it. Usually I don't come up with these things, especially specifically in unit tests. It's usually doesn't come up. Integration tests, a bit more longer scenarios. I put, I think once, like a pointer, like if this failed, you might want to look at, but I think this was once, so I didn't use it much. I don't have time to answer more questions, so if you don't have if you haven't received an answer, don't worry. Make sure that in the follow-up email we're going to send, get back to me and tell me, Gil, you haven't answered my questions. Apart from that, these questions are going to come out, at least my answers to them, in mini blogs that are going to be to be put up both on the site and LinkedIn, and so you can expect that. Uh, for the people who haven't got a copy of this book, we're doing a holiday sale starting tomorrow until the beginning of next year. Hopefully we'll get there. We don't know anything about how 2020 is going to end, but we're very optimistic about that. So two books are going to be in the discount of 70%. You'll get all the information in the follow-up email. I hope you get a chance to read the books. I worked very hard on them, very proud of them. Finally, where to find me, and I already mentioned the site, testinggil.com and everydayunittesting.com. I live on Twitter, so you can find me there. There's the link in LinkedIn, both my profile page and the company page, Testing Gill. You can follow that as well. On Xing, if you're coming, if you're part of Xing, apart from my profile, there's a group called software testing, which you can join. All the links are going to be there, and all the slides are going to be on the site. So when we send out, you can get it, and you can actually click on stuff. I want to thank everyone for coming here today, and I hope this has been useful for you. And if you, like I said, it's going to be the first webinar of many. If you have suggestions for other webinars you want me to talk about, please let me know wherever you can find me. And I'll be sure to post ideas for my webinars so you can know what's coming up next. And I wish you all a very happy, hopefully starting to get better 2020 holiday season. And I hope everything's going to be all right. I'm sure it is. So thank you very much for coming today, and have happy holidays, everyone. And goodbye. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for the support, and remember, live long and test.